Utah politics.
Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Glenn Mills. It is time to go inside Utah politics. We do begin this morning with Brittany Nystrom. She is the executive director of the ACLU of Utah. Brittany, welcome back to the show. Glad to have you with us.
Thanks, Glenn.
A pretty wild 2 weeks up on the Hill. Bills are just really flying through, some controversial ones at that. Let's get into a series of bills that you are working against, and that is addressing transgender youth here in the state of Utah. Just to set it up, we have one bill that would ban surgery and puberty blockers, one that would ban any changes for youth to a birth certificate, and then one that would require schools to notify a parent if a student goes by a different name or pronoun in class. So that sets up the stage here. You oppose those bills. Talk about why.
Right. Well, as you described, Glenn, it is felt from the opening bell that there has been a coordinated effort to push Utah trans youth out of public life and make it harder to be a trans kid in Utah. We oppose these bills because it picks up right where the legislature left off last year with a ban on some trans youth participating in sports and carries it into healthcare and state identification documents. With healthcare, that decision really should be one made by patients, their parents and guardians, and their healthcare team, not politicians. Those bans have been blocked in other states that have passed similar bills for reasons involving the substantive due process rights of parents to make decisions for their children and the equal protection rights of trans youth. So very concerning to see the legislature pushing trans youth away from care and support that they need and have a right to. I want to note that historically, efforts to marginalize go hand in hand with elimination of rights, but we've seen a real outcry against that. Thousands of calls were made to legislatures telling them to vote no on these bills. Hundreds of Utahns turned out at the steps of the Capitol earlier this week in support of the trans community, and trans youth and their parents themselves are delivering powerful statements opposing this restriction of their rights.
I want to dig into specifically the healthcare bill, Senator Kennedy's bill, SB 16. I've heard an argument from supporters, and I'd like to know what your thoughts are on that. And they bring up this fact that even progressive European countries are starting to push back on this. And they're saying, look, at this point, we're not permanently banning this, but we want to see some studies and some data on the potential impacts of this. Your response to that argument?
Well, effectively, it is a ban. I want to clear up any confusion around that. There is no constitutional difference between a ban on your rights if it is now or 3 years from now. So we are interpreting this law as an effective ban on this important health care for trans youth. Medicine and science constantly evolves. There's no debating that, but to have politicians deciding rather than doctors what's in the best interest of these patients just is not the right approach.
Talk more a little bit about the school bill that would require a school or a teacher to report to a parent. Why do you stand against that?
We're watching that very closely. There's been a number of changes to that bill that we support. We are ensuring that students have a right to the support that they need if they are socially transitioning at school.
Let's move on to another bill that's getting, well, a resolution that's getting a lot of attention up on the Hill as well, and that's HJR 2. It would essentially amend rules of civil procedure on an injunction. We've seen some injunctions lately here in the state of Utah with previous bills that have passed. Talk about why you are opposing this resolution.
Sure. So at the ACLU of Utah, we are involved in numerous injunctions. What this bill would do would make it harder for Utahns to protect their constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property. Currently, state courts are empowered to preserve the status quo in cases where serious questions of law are raised. Erasing that protection would make it harder for courts to stand up for the people and protect their interests in emergency situations.
Two specific examples here would be the abortion trigger law and the bill that you already referenced with transgender sports from last year. Supporters of this resolution are saying the standard is too easy. There needs to be a more clearly defined standard for an injunction. Specifically, they say it should be a substantial likelihood that the applicant would prevail in the long run. Your response to that?
We think that state courts should have ample opportunity to protect the rights of Utahns. The standards are clear now. I do also want to point out that the way the resolution is written now, it would not automatically lift any injunctions that are currently in place, but it would allow the party that is enjoined to ask the court to reconsider that injunction.
And do you think it's too easy to get an injunction at this point from what you've seen in the courts?
It is a high standard to meet. It is not one that should be taken lightly. Serious litigation is required to convince a court that constitutional rights are at stake. I consider it a safeguard on the rights of the people to allow the courts to make those decisions.
Any negotiation that could be done in that would make you feel more comfortable with this type of resolution?
We're always open to negotiation, but we're clear that allowing courts to have greater power to protect rights is where we're going to come down.
Let's move on to the Utah Read-In. That's something your organization is getting behind and growing. First off, talk about what that is.
Sure. So the Let Utah Read Coalition, of which the ACLU of Utah is a member, invited parents, teachers, librarians to a read-in in the state capitol earlier this week on January 25th. That is in support of students' right to learn. There has been a real uptick in book bannings and challenges to books since legislation was passed last session that prohibited pornography in schools. We've seen school districts removing books from shelves. We've seen a number of books being challenged, and this coalition stands against censorship and discrimination and for students' right to read.
And where does the coalition go from here? You mentioned the meeting at the Capitol. What are the next steps?
So this coalition recognizes that most Utahns do not support book banning or censorship, and the coalition is really determined that the legislature recognize that.
All right, back to some of the other issues we've talked about. When you talk about coming out and making your voice heard, what advice do you have for those who may be sitting on the sidelines on some of these issues?
Sure. Our democracies work best when people participate. So any way you can think of to contact your legislature, do it. They are responsive to text messages, emails, phone calls. You could come to the Capitol and try to seek them out and have a conversation with them. But to just stand by and expect that they'll know what their constituents want is probably not the best course of action. We really encourage people to get active, get mobilized, look into the bills. We have a bill tracker on our website that states our positions, but use your voice.
And you can even do that by coming up and testifying in a committee hearing.
Absolutely, absolutely. Members of the public are encouraged to testify. You don't even need to go to the State House. You can now participate via Zoom. Yeah. So lots of ways to get involved.
All right, Brittany, I appreciate your insight. It has been quite a 2 weeks. We will see where it goes from here. Thanks
we so sure much. Will. Thanks, Glenn.
All right, you bet. Still to come, lawmakers have a $3 billion budget surplus to appropriate. So how should that money be put to